ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुद्रयेत्। श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता साधका संजीवनी 12th chapter devotional service verses 13 to 20. 39 marks of the devotees who have realized God. The Lord, out of the devotees who worship attributeless and formless Brahma and those who worship God with attributes, declared the latter to be most perfect in yoga and ordered Arjuna to follow the latter path. Then, pertaining to the latter worship, he explained the four means of God realization from the 8th verse to the 11th verse. Now, from the 13th verse to the 19th verse, he describes the marks of his living devotees who have attained perfection in 5 groups. In the first group, consisting of the 13th and the 14th verses, he mentions 12 marks. Verses 13 and 14. Adveshta sarva bhutanam Metraha karuna eva cha Nirmamo nirahankaraha Sama dukha sukha kshami Santushtaha sattatam yogi Yatatma drida nishchaha Maya arpita mano buddhirayo Madbhaktaha same priyaha. He who has no ill will to any being, who is friendly and compassionate to all, who is free from mindness and egoism, even-minded in pleasure and pain, forgiving, ever content, self-controlled, unshakable in determination, with mind and intellect dedicated to me, the yogi, my devotee, is dear to me. Comment. A person can bear ill will to another person in 2 ways. 1. By creating an obstacle to the acquirement of the desirable, such as wealth, honor, praise, etc. 2. By creating undesirable objects, actions, persons, and incidents, etc. A devotee bears no ill will in the least to anyone, even though they may act against his principles, become an obstacle to his progress, and may harm him physically, economically, or mentally, because he beholds his own favorite deity abiding in them. Not only this, but he beholds and feels the gracious sweet will of God in the actions of those who bear ill will to him. Every being, soul, is a fragment of God. So, if a striver bears ill will to any being, it means that he bears ill will to God. Such a person bearing ill will to anyone can neither be identified with God nor can he have exclusive devotion to him. When a devotee becomes totally free from ill will, he can be fully devoted to God. Therefore, a devotee is free from malice for each and every being. He is friendly even to those who harm him because he holds that whatever is done is destined for his welfare by the sweet will of God. Moreover, he thinks that those who are harming him deserve special respect because they are destroying his past sins by becoming an instrument. In the Patanjali Yoga Darshana, 4 factors have been mentioned to purify the mind. Friendship to those who are happy, compassion to those who are sad, the feeling of pleasure to those who are virtuous, and indifference to those who are sinners. But here Lord Krishna has included the 4 factors in 2, friendship and compassion. It means that a perfect devotee is friendly to the happy and the virtuous, and compassionate to the sad and the sinful. A striver, instead of being indifferent to the sinner, should be compassionate to him, because the striver who is suffering is being purified of his old sins by reaping the fruit of his sinful actions of the past, while the sinner who is inflicting pain on the striver is committing a new sin. So, he especially deserves compassion. A person has an egoistic notion by identifying the self with the body and senses, etc. If a devotee has no egoism, but he realizes his true affinity for God, noble, divine, and unique traits are revealed in him. But he, knowing those traits, virtues, as divine, regards them as of God, not of his own. So, he becomes free from egoism. A devotee remains even minded in pleasure and pain, favorable and unfavorable circumstances without having attachment and aversion to them. The favorable and unfavorable circumstances, by making a man happy and sad, bind him. A devotee knows the favorable and the unfavorable circumstances, but he remains even minded. He feels neither happy nor sad. By the term Kshami, the Lord means to say that the devotee is forgiving even to those who do wrong to him without having the least desire to punish them. He wants them not to be punished by God or anyone else for the wrong done to him. Having realized God, a devotee ever remains content because he has neither disunion from him nor does he need the perishable world. Therefore, there is no reason for his discontentment. It is because of this discontentment that he does not attach any importance to any mundane being or object in the least. In fact, no person can ever be disunited from God. He who has realized this fact is a yogi. In fact, the mind, intellect, and senses should follow the right path, but they deviate from the right path because a person is attached to the world. A devotee's mind, intellect, and senses remain under his control because he is not in the least attached to the world, and so his actions are exemplary. The senses of the virtuous and righteous persons never deviate from the right path. King Dushyanta was attached towards Shakuntala, so he had full confidence that she must belong to a Kshatriya warrior family rather than a Brahmana priest one. According to the poet Kalidasa, in case of doubt, the inclination of a virtuous person is the testimony to the right path. How can the mind, intellect, and senses of a perfect devotee deviate from the right path when the senses of even a righteous person don't deviate? An enlightened soul has a firm determination that the world has no independent existence while God never ceases to be and his affinity for him is eternal. An ignorant person considers the world real and attaches importance to it, while a perfect devotee does not believe in the existence of the world. For him only God exists. When a striver resolves that he has to realize God only and he becomes God's, which he really is, his mind and intellect are naturally dedicated to him. Then why should the mind and intellect of a perfect devotee not remain dedicated to him? In the second group, consisting of the next verse, the Lord describes 6 marks of perfect enlightened devotees. Verse 15. Yasmano dvijate loko lokan no dvijate chayaha harsham harsha bhayodveker mukto yaha sacha me priyaha. He by whom the world is not agitated and who is not agitated by the world and who is free from joy, anger, envy, fear and agitation, he is dear to me. Comment. A devotee beholds his most loving Lord everywhere and in all. Therefore, all the activities undertaken by him with his mind, speech and body are only in order to please God. Then how can he agitate anyone? Even then, the life history of devotees shows that some people bear ill will to them and oppose them, having heard their glory or action or modesty, etc. A devotee never vexes anyone because he realizes that all is God. All his activities are naturally for the welfare of all beings. He does not annoy anyone even by an error. People may get annoyed with him because of their demoniac nature. How can a devotee be blamed for their demoniac nature? Bhritrihari declares, deer, fishes and gentle persons live on straw, water and contentment respectively. But hunters, fishermen and wild persons are at enmity with them without any rhyme or reason. In fact, no person can be agitated by devotees. Even the wild persons who bear envy to the devotees in their company by beholding and touching them, by talking to them, and even by thinking of them, abandon their demoniac traits and become devotees. It is because of their generous nature that even wild persons renounce their evil nature and become devotees. Lord Shiva in the Manasa also declares, it is because of the virtue that a saint returns good for evil. But it is not a rule that all the persons who bear envy to devotees should be benefited. If it is held that no one is agitated by devotees, nor does anyone act against them, nor have they any enemy or friend, how can it be said then that they are alike to foe and friend, honor and dishonor, praise and blame, etc.? It means that it is because of their demoniac nature that while people can be agitated by the virtuous actions of devotees, can act against them and can regard them as their foes, while devotees don't regard anyone as their enemy, nor do they agitate anyone. A devotee is also not agitated by any being because of two factors. First, a devotee may have to face unfavorable circumstances, but having known the reality and because of his great devotion to God, he remains so much engrossed in the devotion that he beholds God everywhere, in every being, object and action, etc. So, he beholds the Lord's pastime only. Thus, he is not agitated by any action. Second, a man is agitated only when someone does anything against his desire or belief, etc. But as a devotee has no desire, he is not at all agitated. When the Lord declares that a perfect devotee is free from joy, he means to say that he remains free from evils or modifications such as joy, etc. But it does not mean that he is free from joy, but it means that his joy is eternal, uniform and unique. His joy does not undergo any modification when he either acquires the perishable mundane objects or loses them. He ever feels happy after beholding God and his pastime. A common man is envious of other persons' good fortune, wealth, knowledge, glory and honor, etc. Sometimes even strivers are envious of other strivers' spiritual progress. But a perfect devotee is totally free from this evil because for him in the entire universe there is no independent existence of any being except of God. If a striver, after thinking of the spiritual progress of other strivers, thinks that he should also progress in the same way, it is useful for him. But if he is envious of others' progress, he has a downfall. A person can be full of fear because of two factors. First, external such as lion, a snake, a thief or a robber, etc. and any other worldly loss. Second, internal reasons such as the thought and performance of evil and forbidden deeds such as theft, falsehood, fraud and adultery, etc. A man is in greatest fear of death. Even a wise man is generally in fear of death. Sometimes a striver is also afraid of the fact that his body will become weak by spiritual practice, such as adoration and meditation, etc., and how he will be able to maintain his body and look after the family if he becomes fully dispassionate. A common man is afraid of his rival who is stronger than him. A man has to remain in fear of all of them because he depends on matter, body, etc. When he totally depends on God's feet, he becomes free from fear forever. As an enlightened devotee ever beholds the pastime of his loving Lord only, how can he be full of fear? A man is agitated because of his desire born of ignorance and the demoniac nature. A devotee has no desire because he is totally free from ignorance. As far as his demoniac nature is concerned, it perishes during the course of his spiritual practice, as he has no independent will and God's will is his will. He ever remains pleased in desirable as well as undesirable circumstances by thinking of God's grace in them. So there is total lack of agitation in him. In the third group, which consists of the next verse, the Lord describes 6 marks of perfect devotees. Verse 16. Anapekshaha shuchirdaksha उदासीनो गतव्यथः सर्वारंभ परित्यागी यो मद्भक्तः सा मे प्रियः. He who has no expectation is pure, skillful in action, unconcerned and untroubled, renouncing all initiative in action. He, my devotee, is dear to me. Comment. It is not a rule that by mere desire a man can get necessary materials for maintenance of life, and without having a desire he does not get them. He naturally acquires the necessary objects to maintain his body because the arrangement for the necessary materials for the maintenance of the body has already been made by God. If he has a keen desire to acquire any mundane objects, he creates an obstacle to the acquirement of objects, as the desire does not separate and go to others. So, other people are not inspired to offer those objects to him. It is generally seen that no one wants to offer any object to those thieves, etc., who have a keen desire to acquire it. On the other hand, people want to offer objects to the dispassionate ascetics and innocent children, etc., who don't desire them. Arrangement is made happily by others for the maintenance of their bodies. It proves that necessities of life are provided to those who have no desire for them. Therefore, it is nothing but a folly to desire the required objects, because the desire is an invitation to suffering. An enlightened devotee does not even expect to maintain his body. The body of devotee becomes very much pure because he has neither egoism nor the sense of mind. His mind also becomes very pure because his mind is free from attachment and aversion, pleasure and pain, desire and wrath, and such other evils. Such a devotee, because of his external and internal purity, sanctifies other people who behold him, touch him, talk to him, and think of him. The places of pilgrimage sanctify all the people, while devotees provide pilgrimage to those places, and those places are sanctified by the touch of their feet. But devotees are not proud of it. Such devotees sanctify even the pure, and they move from one place of pilgrimage to another by making them great places of pilgrimage. King Bhagiratha says to the Ganges, "O mother, those who have renounced all the mundane and spiritual desires, who having a disinclination for the world are calm in themselves, who are devoted to Brahma, the Absolute, who purify the worlds, such type of saintly souls will destroy all sins with their touch, because God, who destroys all sins, resides in their hearts." The worldly skill is not the real skill. It is a kind of blood, because it conduces a man to attach more importance to matter, which leads him to a downfall. An enlightened devotee is also skillful in mundane affairs, but it is an insult to him if his skill in mundane affairs is regarded as the touchstone of his progress in the spiritual sphere. An enlightened devotee remains indifferent to whatever happens. He remains detached from all incidents and circumstances, etc., in the same way as a man standing on the top of a high mountain remains unaffected by the fire or flood on the earth. He remains alike to a friend and a foe from his heart. Though his dealings outwardly may seem different, he is ever impartial because he regards the entire universe, including the body, as God's. He remains free from affliction and worries. He is not troubled by the favorable and unfavorable circumstances, attachment and aversion, pleasure and pain, and such other evils. Performance of new actions for pleasure and prosperity is known as arambha, such as accumulation of new articles and starting new business, etc. To hoard money, a devotee renounces all initiative in action for pleasure and prosperity, etc. The Lord has so much of attraction that a devotee is naturally attracted towards him and he becomes devoted to him. Now a question can arise, why all persons are not attracted towards God and become devoted to him if he has so much of attraction? In fact, a person, the self, is naturally attracted towards him because he is his fragment. But it is because of his attachment to the body, senses, mind, intellect, family, and worldly objects, etc., that he has a disinclination for God, whose fragment he is. God pervades everywhere, but he is not revealed to him because of his attachment to the sense objects, that is, mundane pleasures. When a man renounces his attachment to the perishable pleasures, he is naturally attracted towards God and becomes devoted to him. The Lord calls such a devotee who has an exclusive devotion to him, Mad Bhaktaha, and he is loving to him. The Lord in the fourth group, which consists of the next verse, mentions the 5 marks of a perfect devotee. Verse 17. Yo na harshyati na dveshti na shochati na kankshti shubha shubha parityagi bhakti manyah same priyaha. He who neither rejoices nor hates, neither grieves nor desires, and who has renounced good and evil, he who is thus devoted is dear to me. Comment. There are 4 important evils: attachment, aversion, hate, rejoicing, and grief. An enlightened devotee is free from these 4 evils. He realizes that the world, being perishable, has no independent existence. He, the self, being a fragment of God, is imperishable. So, he, instead of having his affinity for the kaleidoscopic world, accepts his affinity for God, which is eternal. Thus, his mind is totally free from such evils as attachment and aversion, etc. During spiritual practice, the more he advances towards spiritualism, the less attachment and aversion he has. When he attains perfection, these evils totally perish. A devotee loves God very much, and so he naturally thinks of him, remembers him, and adores him. Such a devotee has been called here Bhakti Man, full of devotion. A devotee has an exclusive devotion to God, therefore he is very loving to him. In the 5th and last group, which consists of the next 2 verses, the Lord mentions 10 marks of a perfect devotee. Verses 18 and 19. Samha shatrau cha mitre cha tatha manapmanyaho shitoshna sukha dukkheshu samha sanga vivirjitaha tulya ninda stutirmoni santushto yena kena chit aniketaha sthira matir bhaktiman me priyo narha. He who is alike to foe and friend, also in honor and dishonor, who is alike in cold and heat, in pleasures and pain, who is free from attachment, who holds blame and praise equal, who is thoughtful, content with anything, who has no fixed abode, and is firm in mind, that man full of devotion is dear to me. Comment. Being free from attachment and aversion, a perfect devotee is even minded to foe and friend equally. Not to talk of common men, even strivers are swayed by the feelings of enmity and friendship towards such an enlightened devotee. But he ever remains even-minded to foe and friend. A man feels honored or dishonored when he identifies a self with the body. A devotee has neither egoistic notion with the so-called his body nor the sense of mind. So, when his body is honored or dishonored, his mind does not undergo any modification, happiness or sadness. He ever remains established in equanimity. An enlightened devotee's equanimity has been described here in the two pairs of opposites. First, he is equanimous in cold and heat. That is, there is no modification in his mind even when there is a contact of the senses with their sense objects. Second, he has equanimity in pleasure and pain. That is, his mind remains the same in gain and loss of riches and materials, etc. The favorable, happy, and unfavorable, sad. Circumstances are inevitable, so it is not possible to be devoid of them. But an enlightened devotee remains the same even without feeling either happy or sad. One can be devoid of pleasure and pain which arise from favorable and unfavorable circumstances. In the Gita, where there is mention of being even in pleasure and pain, it means that one is even in favorable and unfavorable circumstances. And where there is mention of devoid of pleasure and pain, it means devoid of pleasure and pain arising from these circumstances. It is not possible for a person to be disunited physically from the body, mind, senses, and intellect so long as he remains alive. He can physically renounce objects other than the body, but real renouncement consists in renouncing attachment to the objects and beings rather than their physical renouncement. Had physical renouncement led a person to salvation, every person after death would have attained salvation because he abandons even his body. If he is attached to beings and objects, etc., even after death, he is in bondage because it is attachment rather than physical renouncement which leads to bondage. Praise or censure is generally concerned with one's name. This is an action done by others. People praise or blame a devotee by his name. A devotee has neither the egoistic notion nor the feeling of mind in his name and body, so he remains totally unaffected by praise or blame. He has neither attachment to the person who praises him nor aversion to the person who blames him. A devotee does not perform forbidden, evil actions, and as far as good actions are concerned, he holds that it is he, God, who making him an instrument performs them. So he remains even-minded in praise and blame. An enlightened devotee is called mani, thoughtful, because he naturally thinks of God. He beholds God in every thought that comes to the mind. He constantly thinks of Him only. A devotee is content with the bare means of bodily maintenance, but in fact he is not content with mundane objects and circumstances. He is content constantly as he remains engrossed in devotion to God. So he remains even-minded in favorable and unfavorable circumstances by regarding them as the happenings of his sweet will. Aniketa is not he who is homeless, but he who is not attached to the fixed abode, whether he is a householder or an ascetic. A devotee is not at all attached to his dwelling place and to his body, and has not the least sense of mind with them. A devotee has neither any doubt nor contrary feeling about the existence and form of God. He remains firm in mind about it without any proof such as the scriptures, etc., because he ever naturally remains engrossed in him. An enlightened devotee ever remains engrossed in the sentiment of devotion. So he is called Bhakti Man, full of devotion. Such a man full of devotion is loving to God. The Lord by the term Naraha means to say that only he who has attained the aim of his life by realizing God deserves to be called a Naraha, man. He who hankers after mundane pleasures and prosperity does not deserve to be called a man. As there are 5 different groups, so a person who possesses the marks of any one of the groups is a loving devotee to God. The Lord, while explaining the different marks of enlightened devotees in each group, wants to mention that their virtues may slightly differ according to their spiritual practice, faith, caste, order of life, circumstances, and temperaments, etc. But all of them are totally free from attachment and aversion, pleasure and pain, and such other defects, and they are even minded and remain engrossed in the welfare of all beings equally. A striver, by following the marks of any one of the five groups according to his inclination, faith, ability, and temperament, should try to inculcate them in him. He should not lose heart. He will be successful certainly. In the preceding 7 verses, the Lord mentioned 39 marks of enlightened devotees. Now, in the next verse, he answers Arjuna's question clearly. Verse 20. ये तु धर्म अमृतम इदम यथोक्तम पर्युपास्ते श्रद्धाना मत्परमा भक्तास्तेतीव मे प्रियः. Those who with faith, holding me as their supreme goal, follow this nectar of wisdom, those devotees are exceedingly dear to me. Comment. Though in the path of devotion there is importance of faith and love, devotion, while in the path of knowledge there is importance of discrimination, yet it does not mean that there is no importance of discrimination in the path of devotion and no importance of faith in the path of knowledge. In fact, faith and discrimination play an important role in all the spiritual paths. Discrimination enhances devotion. Similarly, faith in God and in the scriptures conduces a striver to follow the path of knowledge. Therefore, faith and discrimination are helpful in both the paths of devotion and knowledge. A striver keeps good company, but he does not totally avoid bad company. He has self-control, but he also loses it. He practices spiritual practice, but also indulges in anti-spiritual activities. So he does not attain perfection. He remains like common mundane people. Moreover, so long as he possesses vices also with virtues, he is proud of his virtues, and pride is the root of demoniac nature. Therefore, a striver should follow this nectar of wisdom by renouncing all vices, otherwise he will not realize God. He should try his best to do away with the evils. If he finds himself unable to get rid of them, he should pray to God with restlessness. Attachment and aversion, pleasure and pain, desire and wrath are the modifications of the mind. They are not permanent features, like the heat and the sun. The heat can't be separated from the sun, and so the affinity between the sun and the heat is eternal and imperishable, while the modifications such as desire and anger don't remain permanently even in common men, are very little in strivers and totally absent in enlightened souls. Had these modifications been innate, they would have remained uniformly and would have not perished till the inner sense endured. Therefore, they are not innate, they rather come and go. The more a striver advances towards his destination of God realization, the evils such as attachment and aversion become less, and when God is realized, they totally perish. Om Tat Sat. All glories to Sri Partha Sarthi, Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Bhagavad Vani, Srimad Bhagavad Geeta. Sri Hari Arpanamastu.